Gretchen, and welcome back to my channel. Alright, it is time for another Pearson comprehensive guide. This time, my patrons voted on the anti-tragus. Another Pearson that I don't have, so I had to do a lot of research on and actually go to my Instagram followers for a little assistance with it. But I was very excited that my patrons decided to go with this one this month. This one has been on my own mind for a bit, kind of going back and forth. It's not at the top of my list of ones that I would want, but it's not at the bottom either. So I was very excited that my patrons decided that this was the one we were gonna do this month. If you would like to vote for next month's Pearson Comprehensive Guide, you can head on over to Patreon. My patrons get to vote on what the next one is, as well as some other fun things like early access or extra videos. So, the anti-tragus. This is one that I haven't done a whole lot of research on. Again, it's one I've thought about, but it's not something that I've researched extensively myself until now. And let me tell you, it's not as terrible as I thought it was. I thought this was one of those ones, because you don't see it so much, that must have been like horrific, kind of like the snug. You know how like you don't see snugs too often, but you hear about how they reject all the time and they're super painful and they're just like a nightmare? Not really the same for an anti-tragus. If anything, I think people just seem to forget about it, like that it's an option. So if you don't know what it is, you're probably sitting there wondering what the heck I'm talking about. Well, if you have never seen one of my Pearson Comprehensive Guides before, I do cover 5 categories. The first one, what is said Pearson? So in this case, what is an anti-tragus Pearson? Second one, pain and procedure. What kind of pain can you expect from getting this Pearson and how exactly is it done? Third one is healing and aftercare, everyone's favorite part. How long does this Pearson take to heal? What do you have to do to care for it? All the fun things that no one wants to think about. And then the final 2 ones deal with jewelry. The first one, jewelry sizing, and then the second one, jewelry options. So let's go ahead and get started with what exactly is an anti-tragus Pearson. So I will have a picture over here for you so you could see exactly where I'm referring to, because I can describe this Pearson to you all day. You're probably gonna be sitting there going like, what exactly is she referencing? You know where the tragus is, right? It's the little like triangle type thing on the inner part of your ear. So the anti-tragus is gonna be on the opposite side. It is opposite of your tragus, and it is located right above the lobe Pearson. So if you're looking at your own ear, you've got your lobes. You'll notice this little piece of cartilage that kind of sticks up right above your lobes. That is your anti-tragus, or at least where the anti-tragus Pearson goes. The main reason it's called an anti-tragus is because it's opposite of your tragus. So it is that curved piece of cartilage right above your lobes. Sometimes it'll stick out a little bit more, but something to keep in mind that I didn't really see too much in my research, but it is something that you need to just keep in mind if you're gonna go get this Pearson, is that it can be anatomy dependent. Meaning that if your area for getting an anti-tragus isn't more pronounced, more prominent, it may be a little bit more difficult to get it done. So if you notice that your anti-tragus is a little bit more flat and not as prominent as others might be, it could be difficult to get done. You may also notice that one ear has a more pronounced area than the other one. I've noticed that for myself just with different parts of my ears. They're not twins, they're sisters, kind of like eyebrows. So you may find one ear, it's a little bit more flat, but then the other ear is perfectly fine. You can go about that way. So now that you know exactly what Pearson I'm gonna be referencing for the rest of this video, let's move on to procedure and pain. Now, again, I don't have this Pearson myself, so I had to take to Instagram to ask my followers, hey, those of you with an anti-tragus Pearson, on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you rate this Pearson? 1 being nothing at all, 10 being the most horrible thing ever. So I didn't have too many people that had this Pearson. Kind of like with the last Pearson Comprehensive Guide when I asked about dermals, I wasn't expecting an influx of people to say that they had it. So I did have a handful, and when I got the average of everyone's response, it came out to a 5 out of 10, so right in the middle of the road. I also did a little bit of research online, and a lot of the places that offered information about the anti-tragus said that it rates about a 6. So that kind of goes in line, a 5 or 6 out of 10. So it's middle of the road. It's not the worst thing ever, but because it is a thicker piece of cartilage, you can anticipate at least a pinch, maybe even a little bit of uncomfortableness. But it doesn't seem like it's as terrible as we may think it could be. But again, keep in mind, it is a thicker piece of cartilage. It's kind of up there with like a rook or even a daith. Duh. So if you're trying to like figure out what to compare it to, those are probably really good options. Also keep in mind, pain tolerances and pain levels vary. So what's painful to you may not be to me. What's painful to me may not be to you. So take anything that I say about pain-wise, just keep keep it in the back of your mind and anticipate it, and then be pleasantly surprised when it doesn't hurt, or be disappointed when it does. Again, it is considered a more painful piercing just because of its placement as well as the thickness of the cartilage. So when it comes to how this piercing is done, it's going to be very similar to most other piercings. The piercer is going to clean the area, going to mark the area, and then allow you the opportunity to look at that marking and give it the okay, or ask if there's any way to reposition it. Now, I will say there's probably not a whole lot of room for a piercer to try repositioning it. However, if you do bring up a concern, I'm sure they will have either a reasoning or be able to move it around a little bit for you. Much like with every other piercing, clamps may or may not be used. It is up to the discretion of the piercer. It's what they're most comfortable with. I watched a few videos of this piercing be done online. Some people used a clamp, some people did not. It just kind of depends on their preference. And then that also kind of leads into the next part of how exactly does the piercing go? Do you pierce from the outside going in? Do you pierce from the inside going out? Much like with the clamp usage in the videos, I saw a few videos where people went from the outside in and then from the inside out. So if you have an anti-tragus piercing, how was yours done? Leave them in the comments below, because it kind of seemed like it's split 50-50. Again, professional piercers know what they're doing, so if they do go outside in and you're afraid that, you know, might actually stab the inside of your ear, professional piercers do know what they're doing, know how to handle their tools, so I'm always of the mindset of trusting them. They know what they're doing. We don't. All right, so moving on to the next part, which is everyone's absolute favorite, healing and aftercare. Well, we know how cartilage piercings are. Temperamental. Cartilage piercings can take up to a year to heal just because of how temperamental they can be. The slightest little irritation will just cause it to flare up, and you're sitting there going, why? That's just how cartilage piercings are. And the anti-tragus piercing is no different. So while it can take up to a year to heal, it does seem like the average healing time is about 4 to 6 months, moving a little bit more toward that 6-month mark. This is pretty standard for any cartilage piercing. Cartilage piercings just take a while, take a lot of patience and a lot of effort to make sure they heal well. So again, before you go out and get this piercing or any other piercing that does take a little bit of time, make sure that it fits into your lifestyle and that you can care for it for that long. And caring for it, it's the same for every single piercing. You can do saline salt solutions. 2 methods to do it. One, you can do pre-made ones. H2 Ocean and NeilMed are great options. I prefer NeilMed. I've been using it for a while. You spray it on there, let it soak in, rinse it off. Don't let the salt sit behind because it can like crystallize and then end up irritating the piercing. Though I will say with pre-made ones, you don't necessarily need to do that as much as like when you make your own, because there are things in the pre-made ones that make it safe to be on a piercing without fear of further irritation, like if you leave it on there. But that is option number 1. You can just use a pre-made one. Option number 2 is to make your own. Now to make your own, you're gonna need a few ingredients. The first one is 8 ounces of warm, either bottled water or distilled water. Don't use tap water. There's some stuff in tap water that can further irritate a piercing. Make sure that it's warm. Doesn't need to be scalding hot, but cold's not gonna help it so much. Warm is gonna be your best bet. And then with that water, you're gonna take 1/8 to 1/4 of a teaspoon of non-iodized sea salt. Do not go over 1/4 of a teaspoon. Just because you added more does not mean it's gonna cut down on the healing time. If anything, it could irritate the piercing and prolong it. So you're gonna take that non-iodized sea salt, you're gonna mix it up, and there is your solution. You should clean a piercing roughly twice a day, maybe even sometimes 3 times. I always say clean it first thing in the morning and then before you go to bed. If you notice crusties or any kind of oozing throughout the day, a 3rd time may be necessary. Ways to clean it, I recommend Q-tips. I know a lot of people do not like Q-tips, and the main thing to keep in mind about using Q-tips is that the little fibers can get wrapped around the jewelry. So as long as you're aware of that and know how to like clean it up and things like that, you should be okay. Just know that it is a possibility to irritate your piercing because the fibers have wrapped themselves around the jewelry. But as long as you're careful with your solution and just cleaning around it, it should be fine. You can also use cotton rounds. Do not use cotton balls because those fibers are very loose all over the place. Kind of hard to contain them. And with certain piercings, you can just take like the glass that you have your like solution in and be able to dip your ear in there. And you could potentially do that with your anti-tragus. It is on the outside of the ear. You could take that and just put your ear right into the solution and let it soak. Things to not use on a piercing: Neosporin, Bactine, or alcohol products in general. So alcohol products are incredibly drying and they will dry out the skin around your piercing. which is not good. Neosporin and Bactine both prevent oxygen from getting to the piercing, which is needed for it to heal. Neosporin clogs the puncture wound, which is essentially what a piercing is, and won't allow it to drain. You know those crusties that form? That's necessary. Like, they're gross, but it's necessary. It's your body pushing out nasty. So you want it to do that and then just clean up after it. But if you put Neosporin on it, it prevents it from even doing that. And then Bactine even says on their website, don't use us on a piercing. If a product is telling you not to use their stuff on something, it's probably best to follow their instructions. All of these are way too harsh to put on a new piercing or just a piercing in general, so the best thing to do, avoid them. And like with any brand new piercing, don't mess with the jewelry. Don't sit there spinning it. The only time you should mess with it is while you're cleaning it. Sometimes it's inevitable. You can't help if the jewelry moves around in the piercing, but the best thing to do is just leave it alone. As I mentioned, make sure to clear away the crusties when you see them. So if you do notice a larger production of crusties, definitely do your best to clean them up. I suggest like sometimes a third time a day is necessary with a brand new piercing. So when you notice them, clean them away. Headphones may also mess with this piercing slightly, not as much as you would find with a tragus. However, like over-the-ear headphones will definitely press on it some, but potentially earbuds could. It's a little unlikely, but that's not saying that it's out of the question. So just be careful with them. All right, moving on to jewelry sizing. So the standard thickness of anti-tragus jewelry is a 16 gauge. That's pretty standard for most cartilage piercing. As for lengthwise, this goes back to it being slightly anatomy based. It really depends on your anatomy. Some people can have 1/4 of an inch in there, which is super short. Some people need 3/8 of an inch in there, which is pretty long. So it kind of depends on anatomy. Typically a piercer will start you with like 3/8 or even 5/16 of an inch in length just to account for swelling, and then may size you down. Now jewelry options, you have quite a few things that you can put in an anti-tragus. The most common one you'll find is a curved barbell. Now that's the barbell where it's got the two ends and it just curves slightly. Just a little bit of a curve. This is the same kind that you would find in a rook piercing. You also may find things like a captive bead ring, which is the hoop that has the little ball in there that holds things together. You may find a horseshoe or a circular barbell, which is similar to a curved barbell, but a little bit more closed. Not all the way closed, but a little bit more closed. You also can find a segment ring, which is what I typically wear in my septum piercing. It just makes a nice circle, goes all the way around, has a little hinge that opens up. And some people can put a flat back labret stud in there. Now this is very dependent on anatomy and also the angle at which the piercing was done. So this isn't available for everyone. However, your piercer might be able to tell you if it would be an option for you. So there we have it, the anti-tragus piercing. I personally learned quite a bit about it, especially regarding like pain, as well as the fact that it doesn't reject as much as you might think. Like again, I brought up the snug piercing earlier about how it's such a difficult piercing. It rejects a lot. It's very painful. A lot of people just struggle with it. I kind of would have thought the same for an anti-tragus, but that's not the case. A lot of people don't experience those same types of things, but because it's one of those piercings that's more unknown and not a lot of people get it, I think we just kind of forget about it. Let me know in the comments below if you have an anti-tragus piercing. What was it like for you to get? What was the pain like? What kind of jewelry do you have in there? Please let me know how yours was done. Was it like pierced from the outside going into the ear or from the inside of the ear going out? I'm very curious because I saw both ways done online. If you're thinking about it, let me know if you plan on getting it or if you're just thinking about it. Let me know. Also, if you do have one, let us know if you have experienced difficulties with it. It seems like it can be a relatively unproblematic piercing, but I know that's not the case for piercings, especially cartilage ones. They're so temperamental. Let us know. Special thank you to my patrons. You can help support the channel on Patreon while having access to videos early, view and patron-only content, and more. But that is it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up. Go on down there, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell so that YouTube will let you know when I upload next. But until next time, bye all!